Alright, we gotta pump those view numbers up, so let's cook up some hot takes for the intro here. Peggle is better than Bioshock. Wait, I don't think anyone really likes Bioshock anymore. At some point a few years after Infinite released, everyone collectively decided it wasn't cool anymore. I thought it was bad way before any of you guys did, so I'm still cooler, but still, it doesn't have a lot of weight anymore. What about Peggle is better than Red Dead Redemption? The first one, not the second one. I haven't played the second one because it looks boring, but it's definitely better than the first. Does anyone even think about the first anymore? Is that game just forgotten now? Shit. Peggle is definitely better than Dark Souls, but I'm not sure it's necessarily better than Bloodborne. And no, I will not elaborate. Suffice to say, Peggle is better than nearly everything. It's a triumph of a game. I'm not just trying to be provocative. I think it's the apex of PopCap style and probably one of the apexes of this style of casual, immediately accessible pseudo-puzzle games. Like a short hike, it's a remarkably complete game which has absolutely no fat. It's a stripped-down, classic arcade experience that might not quite get to Tetris levels of supreme purity, but comes closer than you might think. It's phenomenal. I've put far more hours into Peggle than any RPG, and it was a more emotionally affecting experience than most of them. I'm not going to say that Peggle is categorically better than sex, but it is better than about the bottom third of sexual experiences I've had. It is, at the very least, better than a good portion of sex. Peggle is going through what looks like a kind of mini resurgence right now. Doug and Bricky have put out some fun videos about it that have accrued a lot of views, so it has our attention again. But Peggle is sort of always going through a resurgence, isn't it? Or at least it never really leaves. Peggle is a game that remains installed on PCs and consoles across the world and never really gets uninstalled. Even if its collective bites sit gathering dust for half a decade, there will come a day where, completely out of the blue, you will feel the burning need to get pegged. Maybe it's just to pop in and play a few random levels. Maybe you'll feel like running through the whole adventure mode again. Or maybe you'll try to clean up some of those master challenges you were never able to clear when you were playing the game more regularly. Regardless, it'll suck you back in. Peggle's immediacy is one of the things which has kept it relevant over all these years. Popcap games in general have a remarkably long tail to their activity, in part because of their format. Games where your skill in them doesn't really atrophy even after years without playing, allowing you to pick up where you left off as though nothing happened. Peggle came out in early 2007. That's fucking crazy. That's the same year as the aforementioned Bioshock. It's also the same year as the first Modern Warfare, Halo 3, and the first Mass Effect. Peggle came out at a tremendously important point of inflection for gaming as a whole, and it's still being played alongside all those other much more critically significant games. That sort of longevity is the sort of thing typically reserved for games considered the best of all time. So what does it mean when it happens to something as seemingly slight as Peggle? Well, naturally, I'd suggest that it indicates that Peggle belongs to a similar pantheon. Different from the big RPGs and spectacle-filled shooters of the era, sure, but not lesser in quality for its simplicity. I love the original Mass Effect, but it's got a lot of jank to it. Stuff that hasn't aged well and needs to be overcome to enjoy the game, even if that's pretty easy for me. Peggle has no jank. It feels as good to play now as it did in 2007. If pressed, I might say that Mass Effect is as good a game as Peggle, but Peggle is probably better designed. To that point, the ghettoization of games like Peggle into the so-called casual market does a tremendous disservice to games as a medium. Ink is constantly spilled over whether walking simulators are real games or not, the answer being who cares what a real game is, where games like Peggle are universally acknowledged to be games, but are also shunted aside as mere time wasters. I think this is completely wrong-headed. A lot of people talk about Peggle being addictive as though that's some feature arrived at wholly uncoupled from game design. But Peggle is addictive because it is a good video game. It's far less manipulative than the Skinner box systems of modern Diablo games or whatever gacha trash your girlfriend is playing right now. Peggle is $5 on Steam right now and does exactly what it says on the metaphorical box. Its addictive quality is the result of its absurdly tight mechanical framework and sumptuous, nearly erotic audiovisual design. At no point do you unlock skins for your Peggle masters. You shoot fucking pegs, that's what the game is about. And you know, the other thing that gets glossed over a lot, Peggle is fucking hard. Not in its basic mechanics or even really your first run through adventure mode where you play all the levels of the base game and unlock all the different characters in sequence, but when you really get into the game and start chasing the challenge levels and achievements. To 100% Peggle, which I did with much wailing and gnashing of teeth, you'll need to beat all the challenge levels and full clear every level of the game. This took literal years for me to do, playing off and on throughout whole chunks of my goddamn life. Part of the magic of Peggle is its constancy. The Herculean labor of fully completing the game is one that can be approached with the utmost patience, grinding a level out every week or so until the aggregate of your suffering finally results in your doctorate of the Peggle arts. It's one of my proudest achievements on Xbox, not merely because it's difficult, but because it represents a background journey against the foreground of my own life. And I think Peggle is best played in this way, a slow agglutinative process of refinement and evolving skill, which mirrors the effect of learning a challenging hobby, like playing guitar or painting figurines. Most serious games are too mechanically or narratively complex to allow for this sort of play experience. You can't walk away from them too long or your skill starts to diminish, but Peggle does, and that alone makes it something special. Back to the nature of the difficulty. Sorry I'm jumping around a lot, but this game is such a holistic experience it's hard to focus on any one feature at a time. Much of the difficulty of Peggle arises from the fact that it's nearly entirely deterministic. The mapping of the location of each peg is entirely static. The only randomization occurs in what color they are. Now, this randomization will certainly have an effect on how you play the level, but within the mechanical framework of the game itself, every shot is deterministic. There is no random variation on shot velocity or in the rebound effect from various surfaces. These are all static calculations. Every shot you make in Peggle, given the same arrangement of pegs and the same angle of delivery, will produce exactly the same result. As such, it is theoretically possible to solve Peggle. This is a game which can be played absolutely perfectly. There are no inconsistencies, only pegs. This is why the whole casual game tag for Peggle is a misnomer. Sure, Peggle can be played casually. Lots of non-gamers end up loving Peggle because it's simple and inherently fun and easy to grasp. More specifically, though, Peggle is a physics-based puzzle game, and an incredibly intricate one at that. Beyond the veneer of impossibly cheerful cartoon characters and slot machine sound effects is an intricate geometry problem. And when you place that geometry problem in a context with functional restrictions like the challenge levels, getting over or under a certain score, winning while starting with just one ball, etc., you get a form of difficulty that can't be exploited around. You either understand how to make these shots or you don't. The tools are all there, you just need to have an intimate understanding of them. Yahtzee on Zero Punctuation did a review of Peggle way back in the day and suggested that Peggle was effectively random, because it was practically impossible to determine shot trajectories after one or two bounces. And I'm sorry, but the shit I've seen guys pull off in this game on YouTube suggests that it is not merely possible to understand past a couple bounces, but perhaps beyond a dozen. I'm sorry you can't handle the math involved, but there are people who can, and those people make this game sing in a way that very few games are able to. I've been on a kick of physics-based puzzle games lately. I've been going back to the Trials series, and I was playing around with You Suck at Parking for a while, and I really enjoy them because they are blisteringly difficult in a way that most gamers don't actually have the patience for. I'm almost done completing the achievement list for Trials HD. I'll definitely talk about that one at one point, and the sheer suffering that game puts you through dwarfs anything FromSoft has ever released. You Suck at Parking requires fine motor skills and a sense of timing way beyond most competitive multiplayer games, and more importantly, it doesn't let you blame your inadequacies on lag or teammates or whatever other cope you've developed to justify your inability to hit Diamond in League. Further compounding the savagery is the inevitably cutesy aesthetic of most of these games. It's one thing to face tank Ornstein and Smough until you pitch your controller through the wall, but bubbly little cartoon characters encouraging you to keep trying as you continuously fail them scourges the ego in a way that a real gamer's game could never match. This juxtaposition, the sheer rapidity of the difficulty combined with the shiny Fisher-Price toy design, is what drove me to 100% Peggle. I was compelled by the continuous emasculation I felt at the rictus grins of its cast of lovable anthropomorphic scamps to persevere. When you failed a million-point challenge for the 10th time, their perpetual encouragement reveals a condescension lurking just underneath the surface. Those big googly eyes are rolling at me. Master Who is, however improbably, making a jerk-off motion with his wing every time I stuff a potentially game-winning shot. Every time my ball ricochets off the bucket at the bottom of the screen, Lord Cinderbottom is calling me a little bitch under his smoky breath. Radical Hamster Jimmy Lightning gazes down at my performance from his spherical throne as I collapse under the weight of another master challenge, and I hate him. I hate him because he has power over me, and I am helpless to alleviate my own suffering unless I harness the Nietzschean will to power and dominate him by pegging harder than I've ever pegged before.
The West has fallen. Billions must peg.
Peggle, like most Popcap games, is outstanding in its readability and ease of access to even the most novice gamer. I bet that the majority of people could look at a screenshot of the game board and intuitively understand 90% of the mechanics of the game in an instant. There's an array of pegs, mostly blue, a large fraction orange, and a couple tantalizingly green and purple. There's a ball launcher at the top, a horizontally patrolling bucket at the bottom, a ball counter to the left, and a point multiplier bar to the right, helpfully color-coded orange as well. Just about the only things you wouldn't necessarily understand from this image would be the purpose of the green and purple pegs and who the strange kitty cat man at the top of the screen is intended to represent. But all those questions are answered by playing even one level, and at that point essentially every mechanic of the game is revealed barring the specific powers of each unlockable character. You don't even need understanding of the pachinko style the game is initially modeled after. Like Tetris, it makes intuitive sense without any further explanation. That being said, further study of the nuances of the game brings a nearly infinite level of depth to the experience. Due to how fine-grained the physics simulation is, there really isn't such a thing as being too good at making shots. Your skill has an asymptotic relationship with a theoretical perfection. Every shot in a level forms its own micro-puzzle, with your choices providing long-term effects on your ultimate success or failure, and the individual peg layouts and various options provided by the characters adds even more shading to the experience. Peggle has exactly the right level of randomization in the way the peg colors spawn, enough to change the approach you might take, but not enough to fundamentally alter the gameplay experience. There's some fringe exceptions. Playing a Splork, for example, means that the placement of the green pegs is unusually important. But outside of these, the core of the gameplay loop is intact. There is no arrangement of pegs that makes a level effortless, and conversely, there is no arrangement that makes a level unwinnable. It merely manipulates the field of play in the same way that AI in a real-time strategy game might. Peggle is not the Dark Souls of puzzle games. It's the StarCraft. Character choice is a big part of the flavor of a level of Peggle, and I find it interesting how it underlines the core principles of the game. When you hit one of the two green pegs found on every level, your character's power activates, adding some advantage for one or more following shots. It is endlessly fascinating to me that every character can have a specific role and specific levels in which their power is particularly useful. This becomes even more apparent when playing the challenge levels, where characters like Bjorn or Tula, typically left by the wayside when playing purely for high score, become crucially important in the altered rule sets you play under. Bjorn's super guide seems underwhelming, but on levels where long-range skill shots are needed, he's the only master who can consistently provide them. Tula ranks low for a lot of people, but her percentile removal of orange pegs becomes substantially more powerful on the levels where the number of them is dramatically increased. At no point is a character purely outclassed by another across the entire spectrum of the game. Well, some people would argue that one does. Master Who. Master Who needs to be ruminated upon philosophically. He is, by most accounts, the best master in the game due to his power Zen Shot, which is a little mysterious in how it actually works behind the scenes. In short, you select a shot angle as normal, but Zen Shot then adjusts the angle, presumably within a small measure of a triangle, to maximize the possible point value of the shot. What it looks like on screen is a reselection of the shot angle, followed by a percentage value more Zen, again presumably indicating how much of a point increase you get from the new angle. It's not a total auto win button. The Zen shot is limited to adjustments within that arbitrarily small measure, so angle selection on the part of the player is still important. However, within that measure, you'll consistently be offered the best possible shot. Due to how frequently this ends up being highly efficient, frequently earning free balls or clearing big swaths of orange pegs off the board, it's typically seen as the strongest power in the game. What fascinates me about it, though, is that Master Who's power is one that doesn't fundamentally change any of the mechanics of the game. The Zen shot isn't a fireball that pierces through pegs or a localized explosion or a respawn of a lost ball. It's just a really good shot. And more importantly, a shot that was entirely possible by the player alone. The game even expresses this to you. When you make a Zen shot, after its calculations, it will display a % more Zen message, unless you already found the best shot within that possible arc, at which point it will say no improvement. Zen shot is the best power in the game, but it's completely unnecessary if you are sufficiently good at Peggle. Much like how no skill in a shooter is better than the ability to shoot people in the head consistently, there is no greater power in Peggle than to be able to make calculated, strong shots. And a power that does exactly that reveals that said power was in your hands all along. You don't need the Zen shot. With sufficient understanding of the game, you can make them yourself. When you internalize that lesson, and I think there's something brilliant in how it's the last power you unlock in adventure mode, you truly realize that there's no ceiling to be found here. It hammers in the physics puzzle fundamentals of the game, much in the same way that golden feathers reinforce the movement-based core of a short hike. With this in mind, the various characters and their powers, while able to be applied strategically, are, beyond a certain point, a sort of flavoring of your particular playstyle. Early on, using character powers is crucial to getting through later levels, but after you've developed sufficiently advanced pegging skills, it becomes more a matter of fun and player expression. If there was an option to select no character at all, even that wouldn't stop you. Quality shot placement is its own superpower, and anything beyond that is really just for fun. So all of this is well and good. Deep mechanical backing, a high skill ceiling, precise controls, etc. You know the deal. But none of it really explains why Peggle took off in such a huge way and is so immediately appealing to a mass audience. The relative simplicity of the concept and the smart eye for UI design certainly helps, but none of those really capture the precise je ne sais quoi that makes Peggle endure. The answer to that is a lot simpler, but no less impressive in its execution. Peggle looks and sounds like candy. Peggle is a game best described as delicious. I want to put it in my mouth. When I say that Peggle looks like candy, I'm not really being metaphorical. It literally looks like candy, all colorful metallic wrappers catching the light, its contents bulging teasingly from holiday season shelves. Everything looks like a ripe nectarine or a Tide Pod or something similar which hacks your brainstem and returns you definitively to monkey. Everything in Peggle is made out of bulbous curves. Every object on the screen is a sort of satchel of potential revealed only by your considerate, careful pegging. You can broadly categorize games as constructive or destructive. You either place objects or remove them. SimCity is a constructive game, naturally. Pac-Man is a destructive one. Peggle is also a destructive game. It's about the satisfaction of the clean board. Pegs are illuminated and then disappear with a pop, revealing more and more of the lovably corny background art with every point accrued. When you combine the design with this sort of gentle destruction, you get the effect of every level being a sort of modular piñata. High-scoring shots are like well-placed swings of the stick, spilling candy points every which way for that dopamine-starved brain to gobble up. Everything in Peggle shines. When you've cleared the final orange peg on a level, it induces extreme fever. Ode to Joy plays, your final ball casts a comet-like contrail of rainbow shadow as it glides toward the bonus point buckets at the bottom, and upon penetration, said bucket erupts in an ejaculation of rainbow sparks and a chest-swelling moan of patriotic priapism, not unlike the most gloriously errant firework on the 4th of July. tipped over, threatening to scorch your mom's Jetta, but hypnotically beautiful nonetheless. It never gets old. It would not in any way surprise me if the designers of Peggle had studied the aesthetics of slot machines on their way to producing something so insidiously alluring. All the hallmarks of the one-armed bandit are here: the gleam of the framing, the tension of seemingly random victories and failures, and, of course, the perpetual eruption of colored light, undoubtedly developed originally as some method of ideological radicalization per the instruction of an even darker splinter of the MKUltra program. Peggle's origins in pachinko point to this clearly, but it runs deeper. The game plays off the excess of not merely playing a slot machine, but being in a Vegas casino itself. It's casual maximalism, dovetailing with a devotion to simple comfort, a gilded cage of finely tuned and controlled excitement. I've heard rumors that the interior day-night cycle of the Bellagio Hotel is designed to subtly play with the guest's circadian rhythms to induce a hypnagogic state. Something similar happens in Peggle. Time slips by breezily while playing. Despite its inherent repetition and homogeneity, it taps into something beyond all of our high-minded concepts of game design, making it feel timeless. Stare into the awful fucking mutant eyes of Jimmy Lightning, and you can perceive a lonely fragment of God gazing back at you. I think, though, what truly makes the experience, or viewed more dimly, what truly exploits the reptile brain, is Peggle's sound design. Peggle's sound design is so powerful that with even slight adjustments to it, the game might have been unremarkable. Every sound in this game has a shocking precision to it, each tone individually as memorable as Doom's shotgun or Silent Hill 2's save. Every sound has at least the ghost of an actual tone behind it, and playing the game at full speed feels like playing the game on a real musical instrument. The centerpiece, of course, is the sound of the ball colliding with pegs, a weighty, hollow thunk which ascends chromatically as more and more pegs are struck, before erupting in a heavenly, glowing tone when a free ball is earned. This chain of ascending tones is the fundamental melody of Peggle. There is background music, sure, a sort of quirky, somewhat jazzy sound, not unlike that found in earlier Maxis games, but your ears focus almost exclusively on the divine sound which arcs toward another free ball, another chance to make a brilliant shot. While all the sounds in Peggle are individually exquisite, nothing defines the experience like those ascending tones. That sound, that perpetual scale run toward victory, is the heartbeat of this game. You could cut away nearly everything else this game does right, and as long as that audio was maintained, it would still be just as brilliant. Dumb guys care about aesthetics. Smart guys care about design. Really, really smart guys care about aesthetics again. Most things in life work like this, I've found. The tiny brain to galaxy brain meme is the very fabric of cultural understanding itself. You have to know the rules to know how to break them, but you need an even better knowledge of set rules to understand why they exist in the first place, what they offer. It's easy to love Peggle, but at a certain point of familiarity with the tenets of game design, it becomes very easy to dismiss it for something jankier, more European, forgotten RPG Maker game. Something that speaks more to personal sophistication, a unique perception of art taste, which, at the end of the day, is usually more about the critic than the article itself. Criticism is, to some extent, the practice of self-definition through contrast. By telling people what you like and don't like, a certain shape of you appears in their psyche, heady stuff. The ability to control others' perception of yourself, no X-Man ever had a power that great. I read Yukio Mishima's Sun and Steel recently. My hand to God, there's something here. I swear. Please, just humor me for a second. I know, I fucking know, but please just let me do this. So I read Yukio Mishima's Sun and Steel recently, and in it, Mishima ruminates a lot on the dichotomy between intellectual and physical life, how the two seem to be at odds with each other unless pursued in parallel and ultimately intertwined philosophically. More to the point, he makes a case for certain simple universal experiences, universal perceptions, as being capable of a tremendous profundity. To gaze upon something in the same context and manner as many have gazed at it before, to specifically not have a unique experience, to be a part of something, not merely in a social or cultural context, but to occupy an identical space as many others, in as much as that is possible. A certain continuum of human experience is established. This physical being outside of words is something very special. This is a very ambitious way of talking about something very simple. Peggle's universality is its strongest asset. When you graduate from average game liker to sophisticated ludic patrician, games like Peggle don't get derided so much as fall by the wayside entirely. You get drunk on complicated storylines, intricate mechanical depth, weird meta design stuff, whatever. In the same way that it becomes very difficult to simply listen to music when you're a musician, it becomes very difficult to simply play a game when you've dedicated thousands of hours to that practice over the course of your life. In some sense, your understanding of an object translates directly to a distance from it. And I think in many cases, including my own, you're constantly chasing the dragon of returning to that naive sense of play. I am perpetually hunting down the dim memory of playing the original Diablo at 7 years old. The weight of the beige trackball mouse in my hand is something I can still feel the outline of if I think very carefully. It is very likely, almost certain, in fact, that I will never have an experience with video games as profound as that again. But that's called getting old. We don't need yet another "why aren't games fun anymore" video to backfill that reality. We're getting old. Get over it. Or don't, I guess, but I think I'd rather age gracefully than cling to youth. Peggle almost gets me there, though. Not out of similarity to other little casual games I'd play as a kid, but in the sense of its irreducibility. Complexity in art can be a sort of defense mechanism. Look at the average nerd's obsession with lore, with logical justifications for every beat in a story from a given comic or movie or game or what have you. It keeps you from the heart of it, from its finite nature. Peggle doesn't have any of that. The purity of the experience cannot be tortured into perpetual navel-gazing analysis. It is a game that is about having fun. And while, yeah, I've spent some time trying to unpack exactly why it's so fun, the real answer, the authentic one, is that it simply is. It is fun to hit the pegs with the ball. It is at once intensely modern in the elegance of its design language, yet also classical in its simplicity. Were it transported back to 1985, it would be perfectly recognizable as a game, and moreover would be just as immediately accessible. This will continue to be the truth 20 years from now. Peggle will never die. It is far, far more enduring and immortal than your or my favorite game. No one's going to be playing Death Stranding on the Mars colony. Peggle will be their national sport. This immortality, the stasis that Peggle exists in, is the crux of my continuing affection for it. I've played Peggle for half my life at this point. I got high and played duels with my friends as a teenager. I kept playing it when I moved out of my parents' place. I took it with me when I joined the military, and I kept playing it when I came back home. Peggle outlasted a lot of jobs, a lot of apartments, and even a marriage. Playing Peggle at a high level is grindy. It's iterative. I like doing things that take steady patience and commitment. I find it soothing. It keeps me from dissociating too badly amidst the problems of the modern world. But it's not a comfort game. I'm not playing Peggle in the way some people loop Final Fantasy VII in periods of depression. In fact, what I keep coming back to is its fundamental lack of comfort. It does very few favors for the player. It's not particularly concerned with whether you can 100% it or not. Peggle is like a big granite monument. It's just there. It's deterministic. You take the shot at the same angle. The ball hits the pegs the same way every time. On release, today, in the far future, the geometry is stable. There are no tricks. Everything is exactly as it should be.